Reviews without power are just an opinion. Let's talk about Thunderbolts.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we are going to be reviewing Thunderbolts. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is. Movie recommendation time. Guys, best recent thing we've seen.
So I actually finished The Woman in the Yard. I think I mentioned it a couple of pods ago that I'd watched about the first half of it, and I loved the way that they were kind of building out this scenario that the family were in, the situation that they were in based on the father's death. And spoilers for anyone that hasn't watched it, you should probably tune out, which is, yeah, we're giving movie recommendations. So if you don't want to know about it, I would highly recommend checking it out. But for anyone that maybe has seen it or someone that doesn't care about spoilers, I thought the ending of it was great in terms of it was kind of the mother that was the woman in the chair, and it was kind of this sort of cycle of depression and this suicidal place that she'd kind of found herself in, and that was almost like the representation of sort of the woman that was in the yard. And I'm trying to remember it, remember it correctly. There was a kind of a few questions I had about the logistics of it, how it like properly worked out. But just the whole like the manifestation of the woman in the yard being because of her and because of the type of mother that she was being to her kids, because of what happened to her, like her father and her husband and stuff like that, was just great. And again, in a generation where all movies are talking about trauma and all movies are talking about feelings and stuff like that, I feel like this one handled the topic really well in first painting the scene and building out the scenario that they found themselves in, and then then the conversation of what do you do in that situation, like how do you handle that situation. Again, there's a whole question mark of whether she actually committed suicide in this, or whether she maybe didn't and refound herself and wanting to live for her children and kind of like realize her mistakes and realize the potential that she was missing out on of the future of her kids if she stayed the way that she was. So there was a lot of question marks and a lot of different interpretations of it, but I just thought from front to back, I feel like it painted a great picture.
Yeah, it's definitely one that people discarded a bit too quickly. And I think a lot of it had to do with the trailer, which just looked super generic and as if just somebody sitting in the yard in a veil is supposed to be scary. And that's not what this movie is at all, right? Like, I think that movie was really underserved by the trailer that kind of made it look a lot worse than it actually was.
And I genuinely thought there was like actual creepy aspects of it as well, especially when they're running away from the shadows of the woman in the yard, and when you kind of like see her in the house and stuff like that. I was genuinely creeped out by it. So I think it landed on the whole aspect for me anyways.
I watched a Netflix series called The Eternaut. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a Argentinian science fiction film series. Sorry, that's so pretty much what happened. There was a deadly snowstorm that killed most of the population. A group of survivors trying to survive an alien invasion. That's pretty much it. First episode was freaking dog poo. I don't know why I continued to watch episode 2, even because there was so many like series that came out this week, not even this week, but just this month and last month. You, which I'm nearly finishing as well, which is another great mention, and Unseen 2, which was unbelievable. Season 2, unbelievable. You guys should watch that as well. But I gave this series another chance to watch episode 2, and I was like, oh, okay, this actually it was getting really good. It is really good. It's mainly character focused, and there are definitely like exciting, like I wouldn't say action scenes, but when you're in like a post-apocalyptic disaster environment, people are going to turn on people, so you're going to see a lot of that as well. I'd say give it a chance. That's episode 2 is where it starts getting good. You can tell it's low budget, but it is good.
So the best thing I watched this week is Almost Famous, which is an autobiographical movie about a music journalist in the 70s. And the story basically is that there's this kid that he's like 17 years old who wants to be a music journalist, and through a series of events he finds himself touring with this up and coming rock band in the 70s. And he kind of sees their world from the inside. And his goal is essentially to follow them throughout their big breakout tour, and then write an article for, I think, Rolling Stone about it. And that's supposed to be his big break into journalism. He kind of befriends them and kind of learns a lot about the music business, and sees things that a 17-year-old maybe shouldn't. It's loosely based on like the experiences of an actual journalist who actually did this in the 70s, but just heightened and stylized a little bit. And it's just a really character-focused drama about this guy growing up in the 70s, essentially, and having to grow up very quickly and having to figure out who he is and what he cares about. and now how the world really works, because he comes from this fairly sheltered suburban home. And his mother does not want him to essentially do any of this, but she realizes she can't stop him. And it's just a really human and very fun and very well written story about this guy's journey, essentially. And I'd not heard about it before. Apparently, it is fairly well known, but I'd not heard about it before, and just put it on randomly and just had a good evening with it.
Okay, so it's time for the main event. Thunderbolts. Will you please give us a synopsis?
Thunderbolts is the newest entry in the MCU, which follows the Ox Group, which has been caught in a corruption scandal and is trying to kind of tie up all of its loose ends. Number of characters are hired essentially to tie up those loose ends. When the boss of Ox Group tries to double cross them, they realize they have to form a team to survive this. And in doing so, they uncover the true intentions of this company and its boss, Valentina. So what did we think of Thunderbolts?
I felt like it was a good stepping stone in the right direction. While watching the film and while it was going on, I was surprised that I was really liking what I was watching. Now, I wouldn't say like it was one of the best Marvel movies I've seen, but as of recent, it's definitely up there. In terms of like its whole legacy, no. In terms of like the whole Marvel legacy, no, like was in its catalog, no, it's not. I'd say it's mid range, but characters were really likable, even though they're meant to be unlikable. You know what I'm saying? They're anti-heroes. I just enjoyed what I was watching. I liked how Bob was practically the human embodiment of what it looks like when your dark thoughts take over. Now, at times it was a bit corny, his storyline. I wouldn't say it was corny, but it was a bit generic, especially with how his kind of like storyline ended up not coming to an end, but how it ended up resolving. And overall, I had a good experience with this one. Like I said, good stepping stone in the right direction for Marvel. There were problems, but overall, I had a good time.
I was convinced that I wasn't going to like this movie from when it was sort of first conceptualized, from when they put the team together, because I was never really a lover of Yelena in Black Widow movie. I kind of enjoyed the Red Guardian, but he was a bit kind of loud and whatever, and I didn't quite like any of the other characters in anything that they'd been in before, apart from Bucky, of course, but any of the other characters like Ghosts and US Agent and stuff like that. I never really liked them in the stuff that they were in, and maybe that's more to do with the movies itself as opposed to the characters. But I had a very, very good time with this movie, and this is comfortably one of the better entries in the MCU. I don't know where I'd rank it, but it's definitely a lot higher than a lot of the stuff that's been put up on Marvel, whether it's this phase or any of the other phases for me. Anyways, I feel like what it got right is that it put character back at the forefront. It had a lot of heart. It made it made me care about the characters and made me care about the group that they put together in this. It had a lot of sort of really cool action sequences as well, and it wasn't just action for action. It was kind of sort of made sense within the story, but in the action sequences, it made sense, especially when they kind of first all come together and first meet up. I quite liked the emotional tone as well behind it, and again, a Marvel movie is never going to deep dive on some of these topics, but the fact that it put it at the forefront of the movie and at least raised awareness on it or kind of touched on it, I think it was handled well enough for the type of movie that it was. And yeah, it was just an overall good time. Like, you just had a good time with these characters, and they weren't again it wasn't like that we were going on this like sprawling adventure with this group. It was, for the first part, especially in sort of one location, as they're coming together and as they're trying to sort of figure out how to come out of the situation that they're in. And yeah, it was just really enjoyable, and I enjoyed caring about the characters again. I enjoyed caring about wanting to see these characters again in another movie. So I give it top marks. Not top marks, but I give it a really good mark.
So I think this movie needs to be judged on three different levels. First one is it a good MCU movie? And I think it is the best MCU movie in several years. Just on a basic quality level, on a story character level, this is better than just about anything that's come out since Endgame. Maybe I wouldn't quite put it at number one, but it's up there. As a movie, it's okay. It's pretty flawed. I think there's a whole bunch of issues with character arcs and character motivations and how it handles its themes. I think that is a little bit sloppy in a few different places, and we'll get to the details of that. And as an on-ramp for for people to get back into the MCU after being away for a few years, it's absolutely terrible. Like, you have to have seen multiple Disney Plus shows and other movies that rank among the least watched in the MCU in order to even get what is going on here, including the villain motivation, including several character motivations, and just backgrounds and just what their deal is. As somebody who has not seen most of what the MCU has done since Endgame, and especially none of the Disney Plus shows, because they did not seem to be very good and very interesting, I was mostly lost most of the time. In some places, the movie caught me up, and in some, it just didn't even try. And I think that's a massive mistake, and we can talk about the details of that. So, good attempt, step in the right direction. We've got some issues. Let's talk about it.
Before we get into like the stuff that you mentioned, because I do want to kind of like talk about, I do kind of agree, but not really. Actually, let's talk about that first real quick. So, in terms of the basic viewer who hasn't actually seen a lot of the Marvel stuff, and kind of like them helping you understand what the hell's going on, because they didn't really do a good job in that. Do you feel like, because for me personally, I think most of the characters, you didn't really need a backstory on what the hell was going on with them, especially with I forgot her name, but she was the one that kept on disappearing. I think the backstory, the flashback, well, not the flashbacks, but Bob's ability to kind of like see their darkest thoughts gave us a look at their backstory. Didn't you feel that when you saw the flashbacks?
So I kind of made a breakdown of all the major characters, and maybe we can go through them and we can each give our thoughts on those characters and whether they worked and were interesting enough.
Oh.
Because I think this is really important, right? This is a team movie. This is supposed to be Guardians of the Galaxy 2.0. This is supposed to be Marvel's Suicide Squad, right? And for that, the characters really have to work. And I have some thoughts on that topic. So Yelena, just to start with, I did not watch Black Widow. I don't know her backstory other than what I've read and stuff like that, right? But just in terms of what I've seen in the movies, I don't know who Yelena is, and the movie doesn't really tell me. And most importantly, it does not tell me what her problem is. And it's going to be a recurring theme in this, but the movie doesn't explain to me why Yelena is in such a bad place. Why she cannot simply do something else. Why she cannot be a hero. None of the other Avengers ever needed permission to be a hero. They just did it because it was the right thing to do. And here she complains that she's unsaid. Like, basically, we have this sequence in the beginning where she is essentially frustrated with her job and she's asking for not exactly a promotion, but a job change, right? She calls it being public facing, which basically means let her do heroic stuff. And the movie never told me why she couldn't, like why she needed permission.
It kind of did though. This is why I agree and kind of disagree with you at the same time. I think it wasn't enough, but they still did it. As in, like, they did it with the flashback. Because I'm sure what they were trying to say is this is all she knows, because she grew up in that system of becoming an assassin, spy, or whatever.
Yeah. But we've seen that story before with Black Widow, and it's basically the same story, right?
Yeah, but they're sisters. And they grew up.
Yeah, they're sisters.
Yeah.
And they both went through the Red Room and stuff like that, right? So they have basically the same background. And so Black Widow never needed permission. She just did what she thought was right. And here, do you think the movie explains like what's holding Yelena back?
Like, I agree with you. I don't think it did, but it kind of does in the sense that it explains that these are all sort of contract hires, basically, for Valentina. And for someone like Yelena, who, again, it's, cares about wanting to feel sort of wanted, with the whole, and I know you didn't watch the Black Widow movie, but they were a family that were kind of cobbled together by the Red Room. And even though they weren't an actual family, she wanted to pretend that they actually were a family. So even though Red Guardian's not her father, she sees him as one because they sort of grew up from very young as him as a parent. And it just kind of seems, and it feels like I'm over-explaining for the movie, but it just kind of seems like even after the events of Black Widow, and this is as someone that has watched it, is that it's the kind of like life that she's used to in terms of, being contracted, being hired, etc., and sort of working for someone. And it just kind of felt like this was, and at the end of the movie, she is actually recruiting. She is, kind of saying like, this is how you can sort of be purposeful, etc., etc. And maybe it was just Valentina kind of like preying on her kind of mourning Black Widow not being around, essentially, or sort of mourning Black Widow sort of dying, and sort of using that and using her to exercise whatever she wanted to do. And again, now the more I'm talking, the more I'm like, the movie didn't explain it, and I'm having to over-explain it for the movie, which is really bad. But I feel like it's not done well. I'm gonna have to agree with Daniel. It's not done well.
I think it's just I did not get the point where she said she wants to do something better but can't, and that's what she has to overcome. She's just basically looking for somebody to give her something better to do, and that's not a sympathetic hero, right? So that's I don't want to write. I've got a long list here of more characters because it's a big cast, but there's going to be recurring themes, and one of them is like I was not convinced that Yelena had a problem. Related to that is I don't quite understand what her big change was, because she is the one who, like when Bob has this existential crisis in the vault, right, and they have to escape, she's the one who gives him the pep talk, but she doesn't want to, right? Like, so I thought the movie needed to do a stronger job of explaining to me why she was in this place and why she couldn't make the change for herself, and then why she becomes more noble and more selfless in the end. Like in general, I think the movie kind of cuts a lot of corners. If we are talking about a movie in which bad guys become good guys, right? We saw this in the Guardians of the Galaxy. We saw this in the Suicide Squad, where at some point they have a moment where they realize, okay, the world needs a hero, and nobody else is around, so it has to be us. And that's kind of a big part of what this movie is. And I felt like that was missing, or at least it was rushed. There did not seem to be a big moment, especially for Yelena, about, okay, now I have to jump over my own shadow. I have to be the hero that I feel is needed, and it has to be me because there's nobody else, right? That sort of thing. I thought that was kind of rushed.
That I agree in terms of the big change of now I need to be a superhero, but I don't think that she was a villain in the same sense that I actually don't think that many of them were actually villains. So like, U.S. Agent was, and we'll get to him as well. U.S. Agent was, announced as Captain America by the government previously. I think Ghost is probably the only one that was like a strong villain in this. Obviously, yep. Bucky had his own journey. So I never really saw Yelena, especially in the Black Widow movie, as a villain that needed to, make that transition to be a hero. But to the point of her journey and sort of her being able to help Bob, there was a few comments made by Red Guardian in this. One when he first sees her and he says that her light completely dim and like she hasn't got a light, and that can be relatable to people for people that have lived life and whatever's happened in their life, they're not the same person that they was, or they don't have the same sort of spark and enthusiasm as they once did. And there was like another comment where he mentioned that she played in goal because she wanted to be the one that everyone depended on, basically showing that natural side of her to want to care for others in this. And there was also a moment as well when he first picks him up in the limo after they've escaped the compound, and he's like, "Oh, I see a little bit more light in you." I know he was all kind of like jokes and stuff like that, but there were like nice lines in there, just kind of hinting at some of the warmth and some of the change that was like happening in Yelena in this movie. So then when you get to the moment of Bob and her helping out Bob, there's also that part where she kind of, I can't remember when it was in the movie when she sort of talks about a problem. Even, I mean, at the very start, she talks to just the random guy that she's got tied up. But there's different points in the movie where she does talk about her experience, and I feel like she says, just talking about it lifts a whole weight off your shoulders. And I feel like that's kind of her slowly refinding herself, slowly lifting the weight off her past and kind of starting to get a bit of her light back.
In terms of what her problem was, I don't want to say you guys were missing the point. I think what it is, it wasn't enough for you. Because what I was going to say was, what was her problem and the void that she kept on referring to in her life was having no purpose. And it was the fact that, because remember, she grew up in, obviously, it was pretty much, her life was pretty much a cycle, right? So all she knew was to kill, missions, kill. So that was pretty much what was creating the void. It was just a repetitive cycle. And then obviously, especially after her sister died, it became even worse. But that repetitive cycle is what created the void, and that was her problem. So then obviously when she found Bob, he was kind of like the vehicle that introduced her to a new purpose, if that makes sense. The team, not even just Bob, but the whole team. But Bob was kind of like the light, that kind of like this darkness but light at the same time that she needed. Once she realized that Bob was in this even worse place than him, she kind of had to like see why his life mattered. And when she was trying to convince him why his life mattered, it was it convinced herself as well, because she had to kind of now look in a more positive light, if that makes sense.
Yeah, let's move on from Yelena. I see what you are saying. I think the movie is clearly trying to do this. I'm just saying they didn't quite get there in terms of actually showing it. But no, I see what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Next on my list is Bucky. Now, we've said in the past about how he was kind of the obvious other candidate for the Captain America role, right? And now I'm kind of glad that he didn't get it, because for the last couple of movies, Bucky has just been just a blank slate to me. I do not know what he wants or why or what what his goal is. He's kind of sad and tired. And one thing I actually kind of found interesting was that he's kind of the last remnant from the old era. And we'll get into like the Age of Heroes and like the meta level of that, I think, after this. But I kept waiting for him to do something interesting, and he just never did. Am I alone?
No, I can't disagree with that. The only thing I liked about Bucky was that they gave him a little bit of his aura back. But when he shows up on the bike and he's like blowing up trucks, and it felt like, you know, good old Bucky from Captain America: Winter Soldier. But
that was great.
Yeah, but like the whole like idea of him being a congressman. Why? Why are you a congressman? What are you trying to get from it? What are you trying to achieve? And you kind of go back to just punching things and blowing things up as a default when you need to get something sorted out anyway. So like that whole arc, from when we first saw it in Captain America: Brave New World to this movie, I didn't quite understand it. I still don't understand it. And now we're part of the new Avengers team now. So it's like, okay, what was the whole idea behind that?
I think Bucky is pretty much the Sam Wilson of this group. I just saw him as a more leadership role, so I think that's his purpose and how I perceive this character. I didn't necessarily he didn't really have too much of an impact, which was what I'll agree with you guys. However, I feel like he was a necessity when it comes to the group because they kind of do need that leader, and he has that kind of like maturity that's needed for the Avengers. I'm kind of still confused if they're the Avengers or not, even though they're Thunderbolts. So I'm a bit confused on how. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But I'm a bit confused on their kind of story, but still. But yeah, I think for me, he was a necessity. However, he just wasn't an interesting necessity, but a necessity.
Yeah, we seem to agree on this one. Next on my list is U.S. Agent. So I have not seen Falcon and the Winter Soldier series, and I know he shows up there and he's kind of the ill-fitting successor to Steve Rogers, right? He's supposed to fill a slot into the Captain America role, and he's a bad fit because he's not as nearly as noble as Captain America, as Steve Rogers was. And I honestly, he was almost my favorite character in this. And there's kind of a few different aspects to this. One of them is, among all of these characters, I had the clearest idea of why he was doing stuff and why he did it that way. The thing that made it fun was he kind of had a point most of the time, and he was still a jerk about it. And that was fun to watch, where he kind of slowly discovered his own nobility, right, through the example of other people and the necessity of the situation. But a lot of the complaints he makes are kind of reasonable. He just didn't have to be quite such a jerk about it, right? Like when Yelena is supposed to disable the lighting, and he's waiting for her cue and she messes it up, and so he blames her for it. He's kind of right. And he is kind of like the most trained in terms of military tactics, and so everybody else is kind of dragging him down, and he can't do things the way he wants. But there's good reasons for that, right? And then he also takes it out on other people, and so he was kind of the most fun. And especially there's this flashback scene where he's supposed to watch his child, and he's kind of doom scrolling about how everybody hates him as Captain America. And I kind of like that, this whole idea of what, okay, we know he's supposed to be the bad guy initially because he takes the role of a character we like, and he's supposed to be a bad fit, and he's supposed to be bad at it. That scene kind of sold me on the idea that he was trying to do a good job and was just set up to fail from the start, and that was kind of interesting. My big problem with him is that, like with all of the other characters, I'm not seeing the road to Damascus moment, right, where a character has the realization, oh, I have to make a change. And I think that is missing for him, and it's missing for everybody else too. And I think that is really the problem with him. But outside of that, I liked him probably the most.
But I think that's the point, though, because remember, they're all anti-heroes, and they need to show that quality that makes them an anti-heroes. And that's the selling point. So I think if they were to kind of realize or see what you're saying, if they were supposed to see the light, let's just refer to it as the light, they would just be the Avengers. But they're not the Avengers. They're the opposite of the Avengers.
Them getting to that point is the story. That's what it's about.
Wow, yes, but not in that sense, though. I think they're still supposed to keep the I feel like they're still supposed to keep that anti-hero quality of theirs and character of theirs. It's not supposed to, but it's when they do discover kind of the light, it's not supposed to be the same light as a generic Avenger would, as in the basic superhero. So I think in their own way, because I think they did. Okay, each of them didn't. I will disagree. I think Yelena and Bob were the only. Well, not even Bob. I think Yelena was probably the only one that did discover for me, that discovered kind of her light, even though she was still an anti-hero. So if they were to discover the light, what would are you saying that their characters should have changed, evolved?
Let's go into that after we make it through the characters. I'm just saying generally there's a lack of a light bulb moment, right? Next one on my list is Red Guardian. He was probably the most insufferable, and again, I've not seen him in Black Widow, but it's just he was just jokes almost like pretty much all, like 80-90% of the time, and just got very tired very quickly. Again, it's similar to Yelena. I don't know what's keeping him from being a hero. He's kind of sitting like in his apartment watching footage from his past, right? And he's kind of feeling sorry for himself about how he can't be a hero anymore and nobody likes him. But again, the movie did not convince me, and maybe this is in Black Widow, I don't know. But just this movie did not convince him that he could not go out and be a hero. What keeps him from fighting crime?
No, he was in prison. Like he was in prison in the Black Widow movie, and I think the government put him in there. And I think again, he's just like another one that has just been beaten down by life and is possibly even like, and I think it's shown in the post credit scene as well. Is he's kind of in it for the wrong reasons. He kind of just wants the fame and the fortune that comes with it. Not the fortune maybe, but just like the fame and the recognition that comes with it.
He wants to be the celebrated hero, right? He liked being the Soviet Superman, and that is over, and that's not coming back. And
Yeah.
nobody's going to celebrate him the way he used to be. And I understand that that's a low point, right? That's deflating. But it's more like, why does he have to sit at home and feel sorry for himself?
Well, he did say that he was waiting for a call. He said because obviously he didn't get a call up to become the Avengers, so that's the reason why he
Yeah.
hasn't really been fighting crime.
He can go on patrol. He can just like this is pretty much all of the characters, right? And I don't want to repeat myself too much, but like again,
That's his anti-hero quality, though.
well, but anti-hero doesn't mean you can't have initiative. It means you're rough around the edges.
No, but I'm saying that's his specific quality because a hero would do what you're saying. They would go on patrol and just kind of like go out there, fight, fight for good or whatever. But because he's an anti-hero, you could say his laziness or his pride or his stubbornness is what's an anti-hero quality. That's a quality that stops him from being a hero, which makes him kind of like an anti-hero because he has, the capabilities of being a hero, but he just doesn't do it.
Like the more that Daniel gives examples, the more I understand his point of, especially for Yelena and Red Guardian, is if you want to be that person, if you want to be sort of front of camera, if you want to be visible in what you're doing, then just do it. Pretty much, there isn't anything that's really stopping them. So I understand, and the movie doesn't really say why I can't just go on the street. Yeah,
I feel like you guys are forgetting that these guys are anti-heroes. Because what you lot are saying that they should be doing is something that heroes would do, but they're not heroes; they're anti-heroes.
But they're complaining that they're not. And so just to cut to the chase, I understand what you're saying, that they don't quite have the temperament and the mentality of a hero, and therefore they're not heroes, right? And I understand that. It's more like it's really frustrating to watch if a character keeps complaining about how much their life sucks, but the movie isn't showing me why, right? And if it's just about them being slackers or being like not having the drive, like why am I watching a movie about them? That's kind of my bottom line. And neither the Guardians of the Galaxy nor the Suicide Squad had this problem. They all did things, and if they wanted something, they went out and got it. And these people don't. And I think that was for me a huge stumbling block.
What if it ties into the emotional themes of the movie? Because again, there'll probably be many people that can see themselves in it, where you want to do something and you have the idea to do something, but you don't. And because you don't do it, your life sucks. And it's not until the moment where the void is kind of gone, where Sentry's gone, become the void, and there's things happening, and they actually are in this situation. It's not like they choose to be in that situation to save people. It's that they are just there. And it's like, in that moment, what do you do? What are your instincts to do as a person that's, got a bit of super soldier serum, essentially. So I can kind of see it from that perspective of, tying into the whole theme of like, depression and sort of how, life can get away from you and how you can kind of sort of be a little bit lost and stuck in the void, etc. So I kind of agree both ways in terms of like the movie should have done a better job of explaining it. But if you look at it through that lens, I can kind of see, it can make sense to me.
But then we can kind of have dialogue where like a character is making excuses, but we're kind of seeing why they are in that place, right? And I think that was kind of just missing. Moving on, Ghost, nothing at all. She does nothing.
I feel bad for her because I really like her.
I liked her in what was it, Ant-Man 2?
Yeah.
I quite like her. I like her design. I like what she does in action sequences. As a character, I have no idea who she is.
And I don't know whether they were relying on people having seen Ant-Man 2 to know her backstory and know the tragedy of it. But I feel like it's frustrating because she was one of the characters I liked the most just because of her like her lines and like how like snarky she was with people and stuff like that, and her power set and her moves and the way that she was like in action scenes. I like the most out of most of the characters, but I agree they gave her nothing to work with.
Yeah, just on a personal level, there's just not much there in this movie. Next one, Valentina. This is my big one. I had no idea who she was. I didn't know what Ox Group was, and I looked it up. And you have to have seen episode 5 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier to know this. And out of protest, I've not gone and seen that episode because it's dumb that you have to have seen that. Like they should have at least like. There's a bunch of other places in this movie where they do a good job catching you up. Here they don't even try. I have no idea what Ox Group is. I don't know who Valentina is. I don't know what her goal is. I don't know why she does anything. She gets some cool lines, and this is very clearly Julia. Like if you've not seen Veep, she's basically playing that character again. Like how most of the lines of Valentina are what was it? Don't sigh at work or something like that. Is one line. Like she has a whole bunch of different lines that are just very like politician-y, and that is straight out of Veep. And she's the perfect cast for this. And I wish the character was more interesting and made more sense. And I'm not saying the character is broken or anything like that, but it's just you have to have seen something else to get what this character's deal is. I think it would not have been very difficult. It's just I think after I've tried to drill it down because I didn't really hate any one part of what she was doing. It didn't click for me. And after thinking about this for 2 days, what it is that she's too many things at once. She's the evil executive. She's the corrupt politician. She's the quasi Nick Fury. She's like this post-truth media personality, right? Who knows how to play the media and control narratives. And she's also seemingly kind of the mentor to all of these heroes. And those different parts don't quite come together for me. I wish it did, and I think it would have been very easy, or at least doable, to do that. Where throughout the movie we get more clues about what it is Valentina actually wants to do, because like on a high level I can kind of get it, right? So this is kind of this corporate group that wants to privatize security, apparently, basically saying the government failed with the Avengers, or we can't rely on the government because the Avengers came and went and we have no control over that, so we have to do it ourselves. And that's why we make the Sentry. And then she was about to be discovered, and then she tried to destroy all the evidence, and that sets the plot in motion. And then she realizes that that they actually have a Sentry, and then she tries to pivot. It just felt like the pieces didn't quite come together, where I had a clear idea of who she was and what she wanted to do, and also why it was bad for her to succeed. Because, like, we understand that Sentry is uncontrollable and ends up being the big villain, but if it worked, then that's probably like if another Thanos shows up next week, Sentry is your only hope, right? So why is this such a scandal? Like, and I'm sure there's an answer there if you really dig into it. It's there. It's just the movie didn't tell me.
I think it's the whole human trial aspect of it, and you know, I mean, the Sentry that they got was like a meth addict that just like turned up on their door as well. So I think it was like the methods that she was using. I don't think what she was doing was wrong. It was just maybe the methodology and who she was involving in this. But I'm surprised you liked her, because I hated everything that she was kind of doing in this movie.
It's mostly that I like Veep, and this was like 80% of Veep. So I like her performance. I like a whole bunch of the lines. I just don't think they come together into a coherent character. Is my problem. And it's kind of a problem if you have a villain who is this big and who is officially, she's a hero, right? Like not a hero, but like on the side of the heroes. She's kind of the Nick Fury character going forward, and we know she's a villain. And it's kind of cool. It's kind of an interesting place. It's more like I wish I had, like, the movie gave me a clearer picture of what was actually at stake and why she did what she did.
And she was inconsistent, which I didn't like, in terms of she was ready to get rid of the whole New Avengers team in the movie and like incinerate them, etc. But then her assistant, who was actively selling the secrets and conspiring with Bucky in this movie, which would have got her impeached, which was, her whole motivation in this was to not get impeached and kind of take action to kind of grasp at whatever control and power she had left. Your assistant is the one that's selling you out, and you kind of just let her go. Seemed a bit inconsistent, and it didn't tie into like her being this like ruthless person who's ready to kill and get rid of anything that's in her way. It just didn't make sense, that part.
But this is where, right, firstly I'm going to say is, I really liked her character. Now, what I will agree on is there wasn't enough backstory because, like, her motivations were a bit confusing to me, and I just didn't understand if her character had any significance until just now, obviously after hearing what Daniel just said. So I will agree and say that okay. So the fact that there is a story to her, it didn't feel like it. It felt like she was just freshly introduced, a new character. However, her as a villain, just the type of villain she was, it felt kind of like a new take in, I wouldn't say in terms of like villains in general, but just in terms of like the Marvel villains that I've seen. I don't know if maybe I just forgot. I did feel like she was very. I felt like she was ruthless and heartless, but in a more vibrant type of way. Do you know what I'm saying? Like she felt very motherly, but a demonic mother, if that makes sense. So
Mm.
I really liked her character. It's just there wasn't enough. I just didn't understand her significance at all. I just thought she felt kind of random.
See, and I think that's a problem with the character. So the MCU has a reputation for having bad villains, and I actually don't agree. I think it's a mixed bag. Some are great, some not so much. But there's a whole bunch who are quite good. Like Red Skull, in the very beginning, you knew who Red Skull was. You knew what he wanted. You knew why. You knew his basic personality. Loki, same way. Thanos, same way. Even like if we go to like one of the worst villains, like the Dark Elf King, like there we also had a pretty decent idea of what was going on. And I'm not, and people are, I think people are going to say, well, she's supposed to be shady, she's supposed to be inscrutable, she's supposed to be a liar, right? She's supposed to have good PR, right? So it's meant to be confusing. But like as a viewer, the movie should give us like a fairly decent idea of who she is and what she wants and what happens if she wins. And that is the part I'm not entirely clear on. I don't think the movie ever tells us like what her office is and what being impeached means and what happens if she doesn't get impeached, right? Like it's not like there's like a big, like I think what like one of the things that was missing was what bad thing will happen if she doesn't get impeached. So she can only get impeached if they find the evidence of this about the Sentry program. That's what Bucky is trying to do. And if that fails, she doesn't get impeached and she remains in office. Number one, I don't know what her office is. Number two, I don't know what bad thing she will do while she remains in office, other than she's a bad person and therefore she should fail. But the stakes of it, I think, are lacking. And I think there's a big problem here where I was kind of kept waiting for it to become clear, and it never did.
I will agree with that. I will agree that I didn't understand what the stakes of that her being impeached was as well, and that was an issue. However, just her portrayal of her character and her it just felt very fresh and new
Yeah.
to me.
And I think we agree about all of that. I'm just saying
Yeah, I
the
agree.
negatives matter or matter more. Right? So having just a few cool moments is not enough. Like the character needs to actually hang together.
I understand.
Next one, Sentry. My take on Sentry is he's one of the most interesting villains in recent years, maybe ever. And I just felt like, especially his ending was pretty terrible, where ultimately like Bob just punches the void, and then the Thunderbolts pull him off, and then he realizes the importance of friendship and compassion, and that's it. That's how he wins. Again, there's lots of different pieces, like this whole idea of what if you give the super serum to somebody who is not Steve Rogers, right? Like we've done this 4 times now, but I think this is one of the more interesting versions of this, right? Like what if you give it to a depressed meth addict? What part of his personality is being amplified here? And I'm not even sure that works because we're talking about this whole idea of the void, right? But what should be amplified is his biggest character traits, which should be like impulsiveness and lack of control and selfishness maybe, or like just not having it togetherness, right? That I think it's, to me at least intuitively, that's what that should be, and that's not what the void is. The void is basically depression. It's basically given human form to depression, but then we win by simply hugging. And it's like and it's, I don't think it quite, like again there's like this pivotal moment missing where Bob kind of makes some big choice that lets him win in the end. It doesn't quite happen.
But I don't think it's Bob winning in the end. I think it's the Thunderbolts or the New Avengers winning in the end. I'm actually surprised you said that because, like as I was watching it, I was like, "Oh, Daniel's gonna like this because it's not your
Yeah.
typical big fight at the end of the movie."
And I was saying it. I said, yeah, that's kind of like that's how I like my pitch of how Wonder Woman should have ended is that it's stupid to have to have a fight against the God of War. So you win against the God of War by not fighting,
Mhm.
right? And this is kind of what this is. So like you're right. This I should like this, But and I think the reason I don't is, and I'm having a hard time putting my finger on it, but I think what it is, it's that the character decision is missing. Like I've mentioned this a few times now, where there's not Bob is at a point where he has to make a decision, and he makes the right decision based on his experiences in the movie so far. Like that's how that should go, and he doesn't.
But is it Bob that's meant to save the day, because he's not one of our established heroes, and he's almost like the villain in this sense. And in that moment when he's punching the void, he's letting the rage and he's letting the anger consume him, and he's like wanting to destroy that negative aspect of it. And it kind of all ties into, again, like, how you deal with depression, how you deal with those negative emotions. And in that particular scene, he's dealing with it in a negative way, which is then consuming him. And you can see something of the void kind of wanting him to continue, and you can see that something like the darkness kind of like rise up on Bob. And for me, it made sense that the emphasis was on the heroes to be the one to pull him out of it, and for the heroes to be the ones that kind of save him from himself because of. And again, it may have worked a little bit better if they went on a little bit more very profound journey themselves, and sort of kind of like overcome a lot more of their own personal demons to then sort of help him from his. But to me, it made perfect sense that, just a bit of love of, like, you've got people here, you've got people that care about you. You don't need to consume yourself in this, and if you deal with it with love, then you'll be okay. So I know, like, yeah, for me, it made perfect sense, and I quite enjoyed the resonance of it being that kind of like saved him from himself.
And you're right that it's not simply Bob's journey; it's also Yelena's, and the two should have kind of happened together, right? Where Bob is convinced that he's not alone, and that there's a point to being a good person, and Yelena needs to kind of get to the point where she wants to be a hero, where she wants to be selfless, right? And like those two things kind of should happen together, and just they certainly try, right? There's the scene where Yelena is the only one who walks into the void to get Bob back from the brink, right? And that, I think that is definitely one of the stronger scenes in the movie, because that is where she's genuinely noble, and she has no idea what's going to happen. Like as far as she knows, she's dying, like when she turns into a shadow, right? And like she does it anyway because it's the only right thing to do, and it's the only chance they have, right? It's more like I was kind of missing this, like this moment. Like I don't want to repeat myself too much, but like there isn't like this the scene where it all comes together and people are at a crossroads and make the right decision. You don't have to do that one thing only, but something like that should have been there, and because it was missing, it felt unsatisfying to me.
I was kind of just gonna go off what you guys were saying. I just saw that scene as that whole sequence of them being in Bob's head as a kind of like a manual on how to face depression. Because obviously him beating up obviously his dark side, literally what it looks like to fight against depression.
Yeah.
And obviously the people being around him, it's kind of like them being in his head is another way of saying you kind of need to let people in order for them to kind of like help you. And obviously with them kind of like hugging him at the end, that was what it looks like. That's what it looks like to, win against depression sometimes. You can't just do it by yourself, because obviously when he was fighting against depression and by yourself, it's easy. Sometimes you can kind of easily be engulfed by the anger, and then it just makes you even worse. But then, having that kind of like community around you to kind of like take you out of it was a metaphor. So it kind of like, it was kind of like a metaphor for that. So,
but it's not just depression, it's also loneliness.
Yeah.
And like I really resent, like here in London, we have these anti-loneliness public awareness campaigns, and they basically amount to, have you tried not being lonely? And they're like the biggest slap in the face ever. It's incredible. I hate these things with a passion, because anybody who's ever been lonely knows how impossible it feels to make a connection with another person. And they go out, like in this movie, go out of their way to kind of say that Bob's problem is loneliness, right? That he does not believe that anybody cares about him. There's no point in caring about anybody. There's no point in trying, because people are going to abandon you anyway, or you're going to be punished for it anyway. And I think the way this arc should have ended is that Yelena convinces him or shows him that this is not true, that there actually are people who care about, not for any particular reason, but just because they care. If you've ever been in that kind of situation, like you believe that nobody will ever do this, that there is no point in anybody who says they will is lying because they want to look good, but not because they will actually do it. If somebody then does take that step, it feels magical. Like it's like the world changes from 1 second to the next. I felt like that was missing, where Bob is kind of in this mode where he has given up on everybody else, including himself, and then Yelena shows him that there is another way, but in a way that makes sense to somebody who has been in that hole for his entire life, and that was missing. And I think maybe that is why it didn't resonate with me, because I did not believe it. I did not believe that somebody who was in that mental state would come back from the brink so easily.
Can I just say, like, can I just say how well designed the Void was in this movie, just in terms of like,
Oh yeah,
his look,
Yeah.
the way he was like menacing, the way he was like just like disappearing people in this. Like the one that got me was the little girl. That was like also the point where I knew that people would come back, because I was like, there's no way they're killing off this little girl. But just the fact that the Red Guardian saved her, and he's having this like hero moment, and then she just poof.
and then she still disappears. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, damn. So everything about like his like villain design and stuff like that, I actually really liked in this movie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like visually, it was really cool. Especially, it wasn't like he wasn't just smashing things. Everything was covered in this blanket of darkness, and that thematically made a lot of sense. So there's a lot to like about this. It's more like the character moment. That I'm not entirely sold on. All right, last character on my list is Mel. She was my favorite. The assistant.
Oh, I was thinking, who the hell is Mel? How is she your favorite?
So she's not perfect, right? But this whole idea of she is the person. So first of all, the MCU is in a unique position that they've been doing this for 17 years or something, and they can now believably tell stories about people who have never known anything else. And she's exactly the right age, if she's like mid-20s or something, where she has never known a world without heroes, and she's freaked out by the fact that there are no heroes anymore. Like from our point of view, like the entire MCU, we've watched the MCU since Iron Man, and there has kind of been this escalation. It starts out in a world without heroes, and then the heroes come into the world and change it. Maybe at times didn't quite change it as much as they should have, but we saw about going from our world to a world with heroes. And Mel is the person who goes the other way, who her baseline is there are heroes who come flying over the horizon to save the day when the aliens invade, and it's gonna be fine because they're gonna win, because the most powerful beings on Earth are on your side, and are here to help you. And now they're gone. Can you imagine how that will screw with your mind? And if anything, they undersold that idea, but it was there. And she thought that initially thought that Valentina was the next best thing. That Valentina's work was trying to either bring the heroes back, or kind of, this is like plan B, right? In the absence of real heroes, this is what we need. And I think she started as a true believer, and over the course of the movie, she was growing in doubt. Like it's not perfect, but for the most part, I think that works quite well. And so I think that is why, for her, it's such a big deal to double cross Valentina and call Bucky. And that is why she's so freaked out by the whole thing. So just conceptually, in terms of what this character represents, that was the most interesting part to me, because now, like I've said on a whole bunch of different places, that the MCU doesn't feel like a real place. It like what we're seeing does not jive with. There have been heroes and aliens and gods walking the earth for 17 years, and characters are behaving like they are part of our world. And every fantastical element is like special, but it shouldn't be special. It should be normal for these people, and they don't act like it. And Mel was the first, like was an attempt to do that, and I thought that was cool.
But my issue with it wasn't an issue with her character. It was an issue with how her character was, how her turning point was introduced. Because when was her turning point introduced? What was it that alarmed her to make her switch?
When she calls Bucky.
No, I know, but what triggered her to call Bucky? Because when she met Bucky, obviously they had that little conversation.
It's something Valentina says. I don't remember the exact line now, but there is a line where basically Bucky talks to her, and he plants like a little seed of doubt in Mel.
But that's the thing. I didn't feel like that seed was strong enough for her to switch. That's what I'm thinking. What the hell did Valentina do?
Well, so that's the problem. I don't remember the exact line, but in that same scene, it's this ball, right, where it's some kind of fundraiser or something, and Mel keeps giving the updates. And part of it is that Valentina does increasingly villainous things, like just killing the operatives, right? Which is not what Mel expected her to do. She thinks it's unnecessary at minimum. I think it's when Valentina says something really careless about having to kill them or something. But like there is a point where Valentina says something, walks away, and the camera zooms in on Mel, and you can see that a light bulb went off in her head. Because, oh no, Valentina is not who I thought she was, or who she says has been saying she. So I do think there is like I've been for an hour now. I've been complaining about lack of key character moments, and I think Mel does have one. And I think that is why I like her more than most of these other characters, because there was in fact a moment of realization, and you could argue about whether or not it should have been that line or something else, or whether what was enough. But like over the course of this evening, where we cut back and forth between the ball and the research facility, and Valentina does increasingly villainous and cruel and harsh things, you can see the doubt growing in Mel, because she realizes that when it chips her down, Valentina's not a good person. She's not a hero, or she's not on the side of good. And at the start of the movie, she at least thought she was. Maybe if she wasn't a hero, then she was at least doing the right thing in some way. And over the course of that evening, Mel realizes that is not the case, and so her doubt starts growing. And then when Bucky shows up, that's her opportunity to do something about it, to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. So she's probably she's not a saint, right? She's not a hero, but it is there, I think.
You sold the character well, even though it wasn't packaged well. Right. But that's a good breakdown of her character. Yeah.
Any other characters you want to talk about? Because we've spent a while now on just breaking down the characters, but I think in an ensemble, character-focused story like this, that's important.
I don't think I think we've covered every character. I think it's a good kind of like, not even a good vehicle, because it's been 1 hour speaking about this, which was definitely a good discussion, but it's a definitely kind of like good vehicle into my question. How well did Thunderbolts kind of connect to the wider MCU, and like how important do you feel like their piece is going to be to the puzzle?
So I wanted to bring this up. Probably one of my favorite scenes where something was actually going on thematically was the big showdown in Avengers Tower, where the idea of heroism is not as much of a theme in this as I thought it was going in, but it is there. And so we have like the absence of heroes, right, with that we've talked about. And so Valentina has the appearance of being good when she isn't, and she buys like Avengers Tower as her base of operations. And that is where Sentry is revealed. And that is where the Thunderbolts come together as a team to fight Sentry. And one of the little touches I liked was that there's a sequence in which there's this big showdown where Valentina basically tells them to get lost. And she walks away and Sentry fights them. Each one of these Thunderbolts attacks Sentry, and they fight in the way that the original Avengers did. So US Agent uses his shield and it gets bent, right? And I don't know if he has an adamantium shield or a vibranium shield. Anybody who has seen the series might know this, but it seems like it should be. So Sentry just bending it into a taco is a big deal. Who else? Bucky does his Winter Soldier things, right? And he loses his arm as a result. Ghost and Red Guardian don't seem to have direct analogs, but Yelena kind of jumps on Sentry and tries and kind of jams her tasers into his neck. And that is a move that Black Widow did. And that was very deliberate, right? There was like this entire sequence where one after the other, the Thunderbolts kind of slot into the Avengers roles. And it doesn't work. They're not good enough. It's not even about heroes. It's just they're not good enough. And Sentry wipes the floor with them and they lose. And it happens in Avengers Towers. I like that. That was probably like I like theme. I like it when a movie kind of does stuff like this, where it makes sense on literal level, but there's like subtext that supports kind of the big idea. And the entire sequence in Avengers Tower is that. It's like the best part of the movie, like on a writing level, I think.
And I hear what you're saying. I didn't actually realize that when I actually saw it. So okay, but what was the purpose behind that though? Oh, that they're not good enough.
To show they're not good enough, exactly.
Okay, but okay, so what is their significance going to be? Because at the end they said they're the new Avengers. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they were just joking.
Well, that's the branding, right? Like they are...
I know that's the branding, but are they going to be like in the Avengers? Or they're going to be their separate entity?
Well, the Avengers don't exist. Did you see the after credit scene?
Yeah, I know that. But to be fair, we know that there's going to be an Avengers movie, so we know there's going to be a new.
No, but did you see the after credit, the mid credit scene? Well, in the mid credit scene, they say they are the new Avengers and they are fighting a copyright battle with Sam Wilson, which I didn't think made sense at all. Sam does not seem to be the kind of person who would do that. But okay, it's a joke, fine. But yeah, they are the Avengers because like they are the official hero team going forward. And how the other heroes and the Fantastic Four will fit into that, we'll see. And part of the point is that they are not really heroes, right? They are not really the Avengers. They are not as noble. They're not as powerful. They are not as effective as a team like original Avengers was all about the Avengers going from being individuals to being a team. And by the end of that, they were in fact a functioning team. And we saw them be very effective as that team, and the Thunderbolts just aren't, or the new Avengers just aren't. Not like they're not as powerful. They're all much more broken than the original characters were. They are much less noble, but they are being propped up as the big hero team. And the person who is giving them that branding is the villain. That's setting them up for something where they will have to rebel against that, where they will have to go rogue probably, or publicly break with Valentina or something like that. Like, I like these characters enough to kind of want to see where that goes. But that's what they're being set up as. And the idea that the villain kind of wins with a press conference is kind of cool.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite moments in the movie.
This felt like a PG version of The Boys, which I really like.
Yeah.
I just enjoyed the whole anti-heroes, just working together and becoming the heroes, but no. At the same time, not wanting to become the heroes. So it was just...
Well, they want to. They don't quite have what it takes.
True.
I would say. So one other thing I wanted to kind of just quickly mention is that we kind of went through this long breakdown of the different characters. There's like recurring themes in there. One of them is that the movie does a lot of telling and not a lot of showing, in the sense that they tell us in what place a character is at, but we don't really see it. It's not really realized in the story. And part of that is also that there's a lot of lines that are individually good, but they don't quite add up. So Valentina, for example, gets a whole bunch of cool lines, but they don't come together into a coherent character, I thought. Similarly, characters have individual lines that seem to tell us who they are and what's going on with them, but they don't really, like, it's not really reflected in terms of what the characters actually do. So with Yelena, like this whole thing about the void, like she has this pep talk with Bob. They talk about the void and about how you just push through, right? Like, at least Yelena says that's what you're supposed to do, and then later comes out that that's not really what she believes. But I didn't feel like she was actually struggling with that void, for example, right? So there's a whole bunch of instances where they put in lines to tell us what we are meant to know or what we're supposed to take away, but it's not really reflected in how characters behave. At least I thought. And I think that is why this does not really come together for me, because that is like a huge sin of screenwriting. And that is why I earlier said it's a big step forward for the MCU, but it's not that great a movie. And that is why I think that. Because a truly good movie needs to kind of reflect these ideas in the behavior of the characters. And it doesn't really, not at least too inconsistently and too shoddily.
When it comes to most of the characters, yeah. However, with Elena, that's where I think we kind of like disagree on, because I think Elena, she does kind of like follow with the theme, because I believe that she has purpose, right? She's looking for her purpose. That's her void. That's her darkness. So I think her theme, like, I think in terms of what you said, I think Yelena does fulfill that. However, the rest of them, no. But Yelena, yes, because I think what she's looking for is purpose. So that is pretty much her character motivation. And that's, the kind of situation that she's in, is the void.
And it's not nothing, right? It's not like this is all broken, or this is all just exposition. It's just not quite there, is what I'm saying. And it feels like, at least in a bunch of different places, they kind of wrote down what characters were trying to say, but then didn't turn that into dialogue and just have the characters say it in some cases. And in some cases, just a cool line, and that's meant to be the characterization. So that's kind of just my takeaway, and I think that is why I walked away a little bit unsatisfied. Like, it's not a disaster, right? Like, this was not infuriating. This was not like Brave New World was actively bad, where plots didn't hold together and you could see how the story had been messed with. And I don't think that's the case here. I think this is the first one that has not, like, that is another new regime and another new strategy, and that is a real script, is what I'm saying, right? And you can absolutely see that. You can see it goes up quite a few notches, but it's not firing on all cylinders quite yet, and it certainly doesn't. I don't think it really deserves like upwards of 90% Rotten Tomatoes, for example. Like, to me, that's like a masterpiece movie, and this isn't that. This is just a competent, pretty good movie with some good ideas and some good moments. I want them to keep going. I want the next few to be even better, and I want them to, like, one of the things that I think is really important here is that the focus on character again, right? And the fact that there's some superpowers, but it's not just energy blasts and blue sky lasers, right? Like, this was in fact a personal internal conflict that played out in a superhero world, and I want to like that, and That's the kind of superhero movie that I like the most. It wasn't quite there in the execution, and it wasn't just not quite there in one or two places, but in all of them pretty much. Just about all the sequences were just a little bit not quite, and that is kind of why I can't quite sing the praises of this movie, even though it takes several steps in the right direction.
I understand. I hear where you're coming from. Yeah. Okay. So, last thoughts.
For me, solid entry into the MCU. I kind of hold it in slightly higher regard than kind of what Daniel mentioned there. Despite its flaws, I had a lot of good time with this movie. Especially, I know we didn't touch too much on it, but especially in that fight when they're all trying to fight Sentry, and he's just kind of like brushing them all aside, and just like things like the Void's design and stuff like that. I feel like there was like a lot of good moments in there, and again, the whole focus on character and actually making you care about the people on screen as opposed to just trying to put on a spectacle and stuff. I feel like it did a lot of things right. Makes me hopeful moving forward with MCU that we're kind of heading in the right direction again, and looking forward to what comes with Fantastic Four.
So, kind of going off what Heavy was saying, I definitely do agree. But I definitely see that this is like the start of I hope it's the start of something good. I just hope that they continue on this trajectory when it comes to how they start telling their stories now, rather than just concentrating on the theatrics. Actually attempt to give us a story, and I feel like that's what they did with this one. They attempted to give us a story. So yeah, man, I'm gonna give this one a solid 7. I'm gonna give this definitely a solid 7. This was definitely good.
I think we're broadly in agreement. I think the flaws stick out more to me than they do to you, but I think we broadly agree about what they are and what the positives are. It's character focused. It's not simply a big CGI spectacle at the end, but I do want this to be a stepping stone towards better stories and better characters and a world that feels more like an actual place. And I think this lays some decent foundations, but it needs to keep going in that direction. And the real test will be like they've gotten several new chances already, and this is the first one where it's mostly worked. I think in order to be actually good, they need to keep going in that direction and take a few more steps each time until we are kind of more where we're at, like mid phase 2 kind of thing, where the quality bar was just so much higher than it has been in recent years. And so for that reason, I give this a new Avengers out of old Avengers.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion/debate. It got a bit feisty a bit at time.
Yeah, if you made it this far, thank you very much for rocking with us. Of course, if you liked everything that we discussed today, tell a friend. And if you thought we were just talking a bunch of nonsense, tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys. Thank you very much, and we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.